This podcast is recorded on the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Coquitlam peoples.
British Columbia, I've seen your mountains high, seen your pretty rainbows and your blue crystal skies, watched your winding rivers as they flow around the bend. To me you're not a stranger, you'll always be a friend.
Coming to you from the West Coast, this is Politicos. Today is April 3rd, 2025.
I'm Scott Lundebaum.
And I'm Ian Bushfield. Thankfully, we don't have to tariff your participation in this podcast yet, because it's just been a hell of a day figuring out how America works.
Yeah, but that's been a whole thing. It's super fun to see your portfolio just do a nosedive from an entirely self-inflicted wound by the globe's largest economy. That's just great. But we're not here to talk about all the stuff happening in the States. There are so many podcasts out there that have that as their beat. We're here to dive into what's been happening the last week of the federal election, plus the BC legislature returns to repeal the carbon tax and parts of Bill C7, or Bill 7.
Patreon.com/Politicos.
It's been a long week.
Let's start in BC with a roundup. We didn't talk about BC last week. The legislature was off, but it's back. And what a week they had. They started Monday with a debate over the carbon tax bill. The government introduced it as like a urgent priority for the government, which allowed them to use the bit of the standing rules that lets them preempt all other debates and push a bill through in one day. They had to do this because they promised to not have the carbon tax on April 1st, which was Tuesday. And if they didn't pass the bill on Monday, we would still have a carbon tax on Tuesday. What a way to run a legislature.
Yeah, especially because the debate ended up going way late. I think it actually finished in like the early hours of the following day.
Yeah,
at least going off the timestamp of what one of our friends DM'd us.
Yeah, exactly. I think it was about 2 a.m. So legislative shenanigans throughout that. They called division at first reading, which almost never happens. I think the last time it happened is when the NDP and Greens teamed up to kill a conservative anti-trans bill at first reading, which is one of the only bills that's never made it past first reading. One of the two Greens voted against it at first reading, but otherwise everyone just let it move forward. It was just dragging it out, and it dragged out through the day. The Conservatives used every chance they could to just stomp their feet and say, why aren't we also taking the industrial carbon tax off? They actually introduced a bill the next day to try to do that as well, because, $2 billion hole in the budget isn't big enough, and not having a climate plan to solve it. The final debate, it sounds like, got so tired that the Conservatives forgot to call division, and so they actually finished up a little bit faster than they could have otherwise. It was going to pass, but it passed without them recording the vote. So everyone gets tired at that hour.
Yeah, especially for a caucus that's not used to the finer points of parliamentary procedure.
And so the carbon tax is gone. And what a...
that 2009 campaign promise finally came into effect. Just took the better part of a decade and a half.
And it's so wild because they could have put enabling legislation in any time earlier. And I guess they tried to make the balancing decision of, do we suffer the political hit all in one day, or do we drag it out, or how do we want to balance this? And this is the approach they chose. I'm not going to say it was the best one, because the other frustrating thing is they kept getting asked, like, what's the plan to make up the budget hole? What about the people who were getting carbon tax rebates? And the government doesn't have answers to that yet. And they've been planning to repeal this since last summer. So
yeah, the whole thing's just sloppy.
Yeah.
They're clear. Yeah, I mean the politics are pretty clear, but the all you have to do around it's just not working well for them.
The other bill to get walked back this week was Bill 7, and yesterday they introduced second reading debate on that with the promise of a repeal. They had talked at the end of last week that they were going to take out Section 4. This is the give cabinet the ability to rewrite laws by fiat section that most people went, that seems a bit much. And
Good.
yeah.
I mean, we just showed you can do stuff in a day if you have to.
And they still kind of fumbled the legislative procedure because I went through the Hansard and David Eby just started talking to the bill, and then it came up for the Conservatives to respond, and they went, I thought we were going to get an amendment here, but we still have the same bill. And then there was some like shenanigans, and the NDP went, okay, we'll figure this out. And they had to like rush back and get the Attorney General to come. Like, it's just amateur hour. What is happening in the legislature? Because the NDP has been in government for 7 years now. I don't get why they're making these rookie mistakes.
Yeah, it's just kind of weird. I don't know, maybe everyone's just tired with everything going on. It's the first couple days back after a break, so it's not a great excuse, but I don't know, I don't have better ones.
It's not like it matters in the grand scheme. Most people aren't watching that closely. But I mean, if you want to bring forward an effective government that's doing things, you need to be able to handle the legislature. And this is suggesting they're a bit rocky at that. And I think their saving grace is the Conservative opposition is rockier, being, a hobbled together cohort of all kinds at the last minute with a few who've already left. So I don't know, if the Conservatives were better organized, the NDP could actually be in trouble. But regardless, the Bill 7 worst parts have been pulled out. The NDP is keeping the other sections that allow them to toll trucks going from America to Alaska, and a couple other minor things like improving internal trade barriers and stuff like that. And most people are fine with that, although I've seen some business groups like the Canadian Federation for Independent Businesses say, no, this whole thing needs to be repealed. John Rustad's actually gotten on that as well, saying that, Trump's walked back some of his tariff threats to Canada, so everything's fine now. Which also doesn't seem like the right answer.
Yeah, especially because, who knows where things will be in a day or two.
By the time this podcast hits the internet, yeah. So yeah, interesting times in BC politics. And there's a lot the opposition could go after the government for today. Both Moody's and S&P downgraded BC's credit rating. Media is liking to point out that's 4 downgrades in 4 years, which is not a great trend.
No, it's not the way you want things to be going. And, some of it can be understandable. 4 years ago, there was kind of some big stuff going on that required a lot of spending. Right now, there's some arguments for uncertainty on all this, and that could potentially affect the credit rating, which is just an attempt to quantify how likely it is the bondholders will get paid back for it. But, the couple years in between, not great that in the relatively good times of that, it's also sliding.
Yeah, S&P notably groups all spending together. That is, operating and capital spending gets counted against us, whereas Moody's is a little bit softer on that. Because our capital spending is driving a big chunk of BC's deficit. And that's stuff that's much easier to pause than cutting services. And so there's some argument that, the province needs that investment, and taking a little bit of a hit here can be worthwhile, even if it does cost us servicing costs. We're still sitting at, what is this, AA minus, or sorry, A plus instead of AA minus, and AA2 instead of AA1. I don't know, they're still A's.
There's so many different levels on this that unless you're a bond trader, you generally don't dive into the details on.
So, bad headline for the government, but still time to turn things around.
Yeah, I just wish there were signs that the government was interested in turning things around on this.
I'd just be curious to know what they're interested in doing at all. Someone who has interests in doing something is former BC United MLA Karen Kirkpatrick, who's been trying to resurrect BC United, but it turns out Kevin Falcon doesn't want to let it go for unknown reasons. So she has gone and registered Centre BC as a new provincial political party. It is not officially launching for a few more weeks, but it's on the Elections BC database. Katie DeRosa and a few others noticed this and started tweeting it out. David Eby, I like this, wishes her luck, noting how funny it is.
The more you can divide the opposition, the better for them. I don't know. This really just feels like the BC answer to the Canadian Future Party.
Who?
The one that Dominic Tardy launched a year or two ago, and whose name I had to look up to make this joke because that is how just irrelevant they are.
Are they running candidates federally? Presumably.
I haven't heard anything on that. That's a good question.
I went to their website. I see 9 candidates across the country.
Okay, so no way they're making it into the debates as one would have expected for such a new party, but yeah, it is just really hard to launch a new party. It's particularly hard to run up the middle and try and displace parties. Like it really is a fool's errand from the for the most part, unless you can just catch the political winds at the absolute right moment. And I don't know why anyone would be thinking this is the moment for a new centrist party, because that is not where any of the political energy in the system is at the moment.
Notably, like partisan divided left versus right province BC, just like screaming for a centrist option, maybe for the first time in 100 years. Maybe.
Yeah, I know a bunch of disaffected former BC Liberal types who no doubt are happy there's somewhere for them to plant their flag, but it strikes me more as a project for the already highly politically engaged and not the sort of thing that's going to generate the groundswell of public support that's needed to succeed electorally.
Indeed. Let's jump to the federal election, and it's been that kind of usual situation you get before the candidate deadline, which is coming up on April 9th. I looked this up and then immediately forgot it.
April 7th, I believe, is when they have to file their paper. April 9th is when the list will be finalized by Elections Canada.
In the next week. And so all the opposition research is dropping, at least like the initial round is starting to come out, and candidates are getting dropped left, right, and mostly on the left and right, or center and right.
Yeah, although sometimes you want to hold this until after the candidate deadline, because then you put them in a really awkward position, because right now you can just boot someone, and it's going to be a bit of a scramble to put someone in the next week, but it's, not impossible if by any means. But once that nomination list is locked, they're with you through the end, whether you like it or not. And, you can promise they won't sit in your caucus if elected, but that's still a riding you're going to throw at the best case scenario. And if not, that's going to be dogging you for the rest of the campaign, which, makes how some of the parties how the Liberals handled it this week interesting, and particularly contrast to the Conservatives, where like pretty much every one of these stories I'm hearing about them for the first time when the announcement is they're getting fired, which is a a sign at least the war room and the campaign is working pretty effectively if they can get that out and decided before it becomes a story, let alone a 4-day one like the Liberals dealt with earlier this week.
With one of the three candidates they've dropped, the Conservatives dropped 4 in 2 days, if we're keeping score. So let's start with the most prominent one, the one you're mentioning, who took 4 days to get dropped. Paul Chiang, the incumbent MP for Markham Unionville, last week comes out that early in January at, I'm not totally sure what kind of event, but he is speaking and a bit comes out where he tells supporters there or people there that if they don't like this conservative candidate, they should go collect the bounty from the government of Hong Kong on this guy, Joe.
Well, the Chinese government basically basically kidnap him and drop him off at the Chinese consulate in Toronto.
And get $1 million.
Well, $1 million Hong Kong.
Or $1 million Hong Kong, yeah.
Yeah, so this is just like wildly inappropriate on so many levels. I mean, there's the clearly anti-democratic part of it. There's we're going to encourage supporters to commit multiple serious crimes. There's the foreign interference aspect. There's this guy only has a bounty on him because he was standing up for democracy in Hong Kong. So there's that. Like, no matter how you slice it, this is terrible on pretty much every level on it. It's the sort of thing that is so obviously disqualifying to say that it is a wonder that he didn't get dropped that day. And in fact, remained a candidate through the Friday when this came out, the Saturday and Sunday, and out up till the end of the day, Monday, at which point the Liberals, and particularly Mark Carney, had gone on record as supporting his candidacy.
And that's when Paul Chiang just announces that he's going to step back and stop being a distraction, which is what inevitably happens. It's interesting for this to come as a sitting MP, right? Everyone else we're going to talk about is like wanting to be an MP as someone who hasn't had political experience. So,
one of the other people is a former MLA for Alberta.
Current MLA, actually.
Current MLA,
you're right.
yes.
You're right. Not, federal MP. The other Liberal. Yeah, Chiang, I think he had a parliamentary secretary role, but was never too prominent. It's a good reminder to me. There's so many MPs that I can't keep track of them, because I'd never heard of Paul Chiang prior to this. He had been a police officer prior to his political involvement.
Yeah, which also makes it even crazier to encourage supporters to commit a serious violent crime, and B, when asked about this, Mark Carney basically just repeated, well, the guy's been a police officer for 28 years or whatever the number was, again and again whenever he was pressed on it, which is a complete non sequitur. Whatever his previous career was before politics really has no bearing on whether or not that was an appropriate thing to say or should be disqualifying or not. Like, Carney flubbed the questions on this hard in a way that really just goes to show how inexperienced he is on all of this, and in some ways feels like out of his depth on dealing with the politics aspects of it.
It's a weird situation to imagine, right? Because you have Mark Carney come into leadership of a caucus that he's not sitting with and he hasn't sat with, and probably hasn't met most of these people, but now he's told to like fire this guy who is a sitting MP. And I get the challenge there. That is different than, unsigning some nomination papers for a candidate. So I got the, 48 hours or the first day or so delay. Joe Tay apparently described that he was afraid for his life and went to the RCMP, and the RCMP confirmed there was an investigation into possible threats against him, and it's unclear if they were investigating Chang specifically. The comments were made to Chinese language media back in January and seem to have not gone anywhere, so it seemed more like a weird aside that Chang was definitely like a lapse of judgment that is literally what he describes it as, and yeah, worth stepping down over and should have happened faster. But yeah, the whole story was kind of weird. I think it's done now, and we've moved on because now we have 5-6 other people to talk about. One we both missed in Calgary Confederation. The Liberals dropped a candidate named Thomas Keeper after it came out there was a stayed domestic assault charge from 2005.
And that he failed to disclose the vetting committee for the Liberals.
But that, interestingly, opened up the seat for, as it seems like, podcaster Corey Hogan from The Strategist to run.
Although, considering the extremely jokey nature of that podcast and that it was released, the announcement was on April 1st, there's still a part of me that is not entirely convinced it isn't a joke, especially because both the Liberal website Elections Canada has not updated their candidate lists to have him on yet. Like 70% sure at this point, but there's still that 30% in the back of my mind.
It does seem like it's happening. Yeah, Hogan's most recently been at the University of Calgary, where he was a vice president, and I have seen some people point out that he was basically running comms for the university when they shut down the pro-Palestine encampments there. That drew quite a bit of criticism for the approach that university took, but I suspect that probably won't matter.
Probably not. And he also was director of communications for the Alberta government under both the NDP and a period under the United Conservative Party.
Yeah. The other candidate the Liberals have dropped is also in Alberta. That's Edmonton Gateway's Rod Loyola, who is a NDP MLA, as talked about, and it has come out that in 2009 he was a rapper, I think it was, going under the name with a group called People's Poets, and he talked about how organizations like Hezbollah and Hamas really are trying to stand up for their people, and that needs to be recognized. These are movements for national liberation, not terrorists.
I mean, they are terrorists.
I mean, yeah, and they were at the time, according to the government of Canada. And so I get why the Liberals don't want him.
Yeah, why let the NDP vetting also miss this? Or, I presume miss this, because the worst case is they didn't consider that disqualifying, but yeah, going to be an awkward time for next time the provincial nominations come up, I'm sure.
On the Conservative side, they had, like I mentioned, a really bad couple days there. The first one was Windsor City Councillor Mark McKenzie, who wanted to run in Windsor-Tecumseh Lakeshore. In 2022, he joked on a podcast about hanging Justin Trudeau or him getting the death penalty. That was bad.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's bad in much the same way the Paul Chain comments were bad.
I think it threatening to murder the Prime Minister slightly worse.
But both cases are instances of using violence to achieve political ends. They're maybe slightly different in degree, but not in kind.
The next couple for the Conservatives were a little weird. Stephen Marquis was running in the riding of Laurier-Sainte-Marie, which is Stephen Guilbeault's riding, and he just said he got a call from the Quebec operations manager that certain individuals within the party had consulted his recent posts on Twitter X and deemed these sufficient reason to end our political collaboration. And we don't know more than that, but he's not a candidate anymore. I did try to scroll his Twitter, and he says he hasn't deleted anything, so I don't know. they found something. Next, New Westminster, Burnaby, Mallardville Conservative candidate Lawrence Singh was told he doesn't get to be a candidate, and it's come out that he previously defended the Chinese government in tweets.
Yeah, particularly their treatment of the Uyghur population, as well as just a bunch of their general authoritarian stuff. Like, obviously bad.
Doesn't fit with the conservatives for sure.
I mean, shouldn't fit with any party, really.
And the final one they dropped was Don Patel from Etobicoke North, who had pretty much endorsed positions that the Modi government should deport a bunch of people from Canada.
Or a bunch of people should be deported from Canada to be dealt with by the Modi government,
Yeah.
I think.
Also,
yeah.
pro foreign interference kind of stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, I slightly disagree with you on whether or not this is really bad wheat for them. Like, yeah, there are some vetting fails on this, but they moved very quickly on all of these. And as a result, like, there's no staying power to the story. Nobody is going to remember Mark McKenzie next week. Hell, they probably won't even remember him tomorrow.
No one's going to remember Paul Chang next week. Like, the Conservatives dropped 4 candidates in a day. That kind of killed both stories. Like, they canceled out, effectively.
I don't know. Well, for one thing, you didn't have Pierre Poilievre going on the record that then got put on the evening news for each of these candidates saying they have my full confidence. So there's that. There wasn't like several days of news stories about each of those. Yeah, like ultimately drop candidates probably don't matter all that much. Hell, as BC showed, even keeping some candidates don't really matter all that much, but it's still, one of those things that cost the Liberals days of the campaign, which, these didn't cost the Conservatives days. They were, just one story among many for the Conservatives, but the Paul Chain was the story of Monday.
It's probably not the last candidate the Conservatives are going to lose. There are people calling for Aaron Gunn to be disqualified. He famously...
I'm going to guess he's going to stay around.
Yeah, I would agree.
Because none of this stuff is new. Everyone kind of knew what that entailed before, so the decision was obviously made on that already. And yeah, as a result, I don't see them really ditching him, in part because it is just at this point a known quantity. But we'll see how much persistent heat the Conservatives get on this. But yeah, I suspect unless it significantly ramps up.
Yeah, right now it's a former vice chief of UBC Indian Chiefs calling for his removal, which isn't nothing, but isn't like a chorus of people yet.
If it knocks the party off message for a day or two, that's when I suspect there'd be something. But yeah, so far has not climbed to that level.
He's definitely not alone in the kind of commentary he's made in the Conservative caucus either. Like, he's probably more extreme than most, but I suspect we'll see more in that vein of, like, for those who don't recall, Aaron Gunn ran the BC Proud website. He tried to run for BC Liberal leader and they red-lit him. They blocked him from running. And then he got involved in founding the BC Conservatives as it exists today. And then announced his federal run with the Conservatives in, I think, Powell River. Or northern
tip of Vancouver Island.
Yeah.
Which it may cross over into Powell River.
So he's got a long history of, the reactionary statements you would probably expect, criticizing reconciliation and Truth and Reconciliation Commission findings, criticizing trans issues, yada yada. He's been all over, so I don't like him. Anyway, The other person who's not running this year is Han Dong, the independent MP who didn't get back into the Conservative, or who didn't get back into the Liberal Party after he had to step aside amid foreign interference allegations in his nomination contest last time, and has not, like, nothing's come of that. There's been repeated investigations. Nothing has shown that he has done anything wrong. He's suing Global News for defamation, and that lawsuit is proceeding despite a effort to anti-slap him out. And it seems like the evidence you kind of trumped up against him in Global News at the time is falling apart, and yet the Liberals are like, nah, we'll just let him go. And so he's going to retire, because running as an independent, unless you're Mike DeYoung with spite in your veins, probably isn't worthwhile.
No, probably not. It would have been a very tough re-election bid for him.
I am curious to see how his longer fight goes. I did notice Sam Cooper, who wrote some of those original stories, is now doing interviews with Laura Loomer, which is just... I didn't expect that. I didn't have a high esteem for him.
Yeah.
But that goes way worse than I was expecting.
Yeah, I would not have necessarily placed his politics on the "will go on with Laura Loomer" category. There's definitely some reactionary parts of it, particularly some of his coverage of the BC housing situation. For one, he was one of the people that was really leading the charge on the "it's all China's fault."
He really doesn't like China, I've noticed.
Yeah. But yeah, that's would not have necessarily assumed that that would lead to Laura Loomer.
So, besides the candidate shakeups, the other broader story of the last week, especially at the end of last week, and we didn't talk about it in last week's podcast, is just
I think it was mostly breaking a little bit Friday, but kind of Saturday through Monday was when it was really nominated. So we just missed it when we recorded last week.
It was a series of about 3 stories in a row to 3 separate outlets, all getting a long list of anonymous sources within the Conservative Party saying things like the wheels are coming off, things are chaotic. This is all being run by Polyev and lead campaign manager Jenny Byrne, and it's high turnover, everyone's stressed, no one's happy.
And then the Ford team just coming out with both leaking their polling that says the Conservatives are doing terribly in Ontario, and then Tory Tonight, the chief strategist, I think is his role with the Ford, basically one of the top political guys in the Ford operation, going on record at, I think it was an Empire Club event, one of the those clubs in downtown Toronto, basically saying, Pierre's really screwing this one up. All the vaguely Trumpy tone and whatnot, the not positioning the campaign in a way that answers the core question of the election is just dragging them down. Which, hard to argue with that. I think Tor's analysis is pretty spot on that.
Yeah, it's hard to look at it's hard to look at a campaign that was 10 to 25 points ahead in the polls and is suddenly 5 to 10 points back, unless you pick your favorite one exception poll of the last 20 or 30, and say, things are going great. So
of course, the crazy thing is they're still polling, I think, higher than they've been in any election since Harper won in 2011. They're sitting at 38 or so, which would be their best popular vote result in a while. But because this has basically turned into a two-party race and the NDP have become utterly irrelevant for this campaign, and the Blot's not exactly doing hot either.
All the other parties are squeezed out. The NDP's sitting 10 or lower, the Greens at 1 or 2 when they could do
Yeah, so, some of the
5.
projections even have my ride, which is like a deep orange riding, as being about as safe an NDP seat as you can have in the country as a toss-up. And, problems with riding level projections and everything, but like just the fact that things have changed that much where that's a possibility is wild.
I think the thing for the Conservatives in their favor is the People's Party is also down to 1 to 3%. And so they've managed to consolidate all of that, and they've held on to that for a while. They've lost a couple points probably since the fall, but mostly it's the Liberals have consolidated everyone else behind them as people go, we don't want, or, we want a strong Liberal, not someone who we worry might be too friendly with Trump.
Yeah, so it's a combination of losing some of the first or last in first out people who'd had moved their support over the Conservatives, plus the complete consolidation almost around Carney for the rest of the political spectrum on there. And I really think a huge amount of this is that there's just one question that is at the front of everyone's mind, and if you don't have a good answer for that, and not just a good answer, but deliver it effectively, which I think's been another part of the problem, is he said some stuff that I think wouldn't be that far off from where the Liberals are, but like, part of the problem is it's delivered in a way that kind of lacks the high enthusiasm communication style that we've seen from him on pretty much everything else. So there's just a tonal disconnect on it.
The key thing that I also took from the raft of stories wasn't that it's just they're not connecting, right? But that internally it's not fun. And I don't mean that just glibly. I mean, like, it's a siege mentality where there's like borderline allegations of bullying. People are like really tense. There's high turnover. It's staff who don't feel appreciated. It's a situation where it's, Jenny Burns' way or the highway. And they had so long to be prepared. And it seems like they weren't. They've been calling for an election for so fucking long. When they finally got it, they have nothing. They're like, I don't know, we're struggling to pull candidates together. We're getting some dodgy ones here. People are getting screamed at when they suggest anything different. Like, it's wild from that angle.
Yeah, the slowness to adapt on this is absolutely a problem. And yeah, from the sounds of it, that's definitely driven by some of the internal dysfunction, but it's a little surprising they didn't have a more put together campaign team on this. Because like you've been saying, they've been preparing for this campaign forever. And, from all appearances, at the start of March, they were by far the best prepared and organized of anyone. But, it's a saying that no plan survives first contact with the enemy, and it seems like this team's not entirely surviving that either.
They still have 3 weeks to go, so things could get turned around. A little more than 3 weeks even. But it's bizarre to start an election with headlines talking about how the wheels are coming off, literally.
Yeah, that's the conclusion of week 1.
Not great.
No, yeah. There's still some chance for them to turn around. The fundamentals on everything but the American question is very much in their favor. So who knows what'll happen? Something could either neuter that, somewhat unlikely, or, come the debates, it could be one of those few debates where there is that significant knockout moment. Most election debates, that doesn't happen. But every now and then, there's Jack Layton against Ignatieff in 2011. There's the you had a choice between Turner and Mulrooney, and was that 84, I think?
Mm-hmm.
Like, every now and then those happen, and given the political inexperience of the head of the Liberal campaign, there's probably a higher risk than normal on that one. High likelihood in the French one, I think, but that would only impact Quebec. Even a knockout blow there is probably not going to percolate out to the rest of Canada, but could definitely be a thing that comes up. So there's a few potential turning points here. There's still some decent fundamentals, other if you can get people to focus on them rather than the other one, which is a big lift. But with the Conservatives at their probably high watermark in an election campaign in the last decade, it's too soon to rule them out too.
For all their fundamentals, I mean, the big challenge is people don't like Pierre Poilievre. Like, young men do, but the data continually shows, like, he's got a lot of challenges, particularly with older voters of all people, women, and finding a way to get over that. And
yeah, but that's not always necessary. Like, I don't think
not necessary. But
I don't think Harper
people
won the likability contest on many of his elections.
I think he got tolerated by 2015 or 2011. Sorry,
that's the thing. Like, people tolerated Harper a lot, but there's usually someone else, primarily Jack Layton, that won the likability question on it. And actually, come to think of it, maybe Dion and Nadia weren't exactly knocking it out of the park on those either. But it's not a requirement, but it makes it harder.
It just goes to my thought that the debate could go very bad for Poilievre too.
Yeah.
Like, the only person, well, I guess on that stage you'll have Jagmeet Singh has done debates before and been fine. And Yves-François Blanchet, I think he does great in debates.
Well, you only watch he presumably does pretty well in the French one, that's what I've heard. And the English one, he doesn't actually have to do anything, so he just gets to snipe from the sidelines on it, because he has no votes on the line, so it is basically a sit back, relax, and just
shitpost.
Shitpost the way through the debate.
Let's talk policy, because I think one of the things the Conservatives have tried this week is dropping a lot more little things to try to find some traction.
Yeah, and notably, a lot of it is phrased in terms of economic nationalism. Well,
let's start with them. I think the most substantive thing they pitched is kind of what everyone's talking about, a national energy corridor. Theirs is a Canada First national energy corridor. They notably include pipelines in there, as well as transmission lines, railways, and other critical infrastructure, and they would get this pre-approved across the country somehow.
But we did spat. They've been talking about this for years now.
Like I said, basically everyone's on board with this, with the debate over how much pipelines you're going to put in there,
and how quickly to fast track stuff.
Yeah.
Or what needs to be done to fast track, and what is something that you absolutely can't touch.
So, yeah, fine. Decent.
Yeah, there's very little daylight between anyone on this, and particularly because the Liberals have been kind of hugging the Conservatives on policy in a lot of cases. I think somewhat going off of the likability question of we kind of know you're pissed at a lot of the stuff the party has done over the last 10 years, but new guy, new policies. What if you just get the change everything, but in a more likable package, which does seem to be working for them.
On the oil and gas front, they also did a specific Newfoundland statement that they will support Newfoundland and Labrador's plan to double oil and gas production. I'm going to be very curious to see if the Conservatives do come out with anything pro-climate, because they also announced axing GST on Canadian-made cars. They're finding anything they can. They find any tax they can, and they're going to axe it, Scott.
Yeah, there might be something in the final platform that's put out, but I don't know. This feels like the first election in a long time where that is not a threshold question for a lot of voters. It's just been relegated out of the main topics of conversation. You might actually be able to get by as a conservative campaign in this election without talking climate for the first time.
It's not good for the planet, though.
Yeah, but just as a matter of political analysis and how you win a campaign, might be the case. But yeah, so the GST on cars, no GST on cars was announced today. So these would be made in Canada cars, which I think someone pointed out is basically Honda Civics and a bunch of trucks as the ones that are actually assembled in Canada.
I mean, that works for his base.
I mean, I drive a Civic; it's a good car, but
a lot of trucks.
I would buy I would buy another one when mine finally hits the bucket in like another 300,000 kilometers in like 20 years, because those things will last forever. Yeah, I don't really know if there's much to add on that beyond it's like a clear, we're trying to play this up for getting the dual benefit of tax cuts and taking a stand for Canadian industry on it. Though it does feel like when you pair it with some of the other ones, such as the one we'll talk about next, that eventually the Conservatives may, by the end of this, basically recreate a tariff system by basically excluding anything in Canada from taxation if they keep this up.
Well, I was going to talk about cutting the alcohol taxes next, which they kind of slipped out there a couple days ago, that they would axe the escalator tax on wine, beer, and spirits back to 2017 levels and end the automatic increases.
Which I'm pretty sure that's a peg to inflation, isn't it?
I think so. I think there were a couple like jumps because, or maybe that was provincially we did that, because sin taxes are an easy way to get funds and also be like, people shouldn't be drinking that much or smoking that much anyway, because they probably shouldn't. And so making it a little more expensive, like from a public health and revenue point of view, isn't the worst approach.
Yeah, it's basically the same logic as carbon taxes.
Except now we're going to, he's not doing buck a beer at least. That was good branding. This is, Polyev will axe the annual liberal beer tax increase. I mean, like, what are we doing? Fine, your liquor will get a little bit cheaper. But the more substantive, interesting one is the Canada First reinvestment tax cut. Why is it all a tax cut? This is the TFSA thing, right?
No, this is actually separate.
Oh my
so
God.
This is a proposal to exempt any capital gains from taxation, provided it is reinvested in Canada.
Man, they're running on schemes this year.
This one, like, I don't entirely hate. There's not been enough capital investment in Canada for a while, and yeah, I wish we could figure this stuff out in more of a, well, why is that, rather than trying to clutch it with cut to the tax rate on it, and it's gonna be probably a pain in the ass to administer, but there's at least a logic to it of, you tax something more, you get less of it. You cut the tax rate on it, you get more of it. We want more capital investment in Canada. We'll cut the disincentive on it. There's at least a logic to it. Wouldn't be my first choice of where to look, but it's not the worst proposal on here.
They're proposing to run it for about 18 months from July 1st, 2025 to the end of 2026. And quote, if it causes a major economic boon, as expected, Conservatives will make it permanent. Which I kind of get doing stuff as short-term stimuli to respond to everything that's happening. And so, sure, whatever. This does seem like the more conservative way to approach it than, cash handouts to workers or something like that. Which...
And there's also it's been a persistent problem in Canada that like a lot of Canadian businesses don't invest as much as say American ones in productivity enhancing capital investments. Would generally be good if we could get more of that. We'd have to see how much of this actually turns out, but if we could juice that, that would actually be really great long term for the country. Also, in the same announcement as the GST, they're going to be proposing a Keep Canadians Working fund that's going to have $3 billion in short-term credit and low-interest loans to keep companies afloat during the trade war, which, seems reasonable. There's probably not a lot of daylight between them and the other parties on that.
Yeah, I like that more than how the CEWS ended up working out, where a lot of companies took that money to keep their employees during COVID, but then still posted profits. And there was some mismatch in priorities there, but at least like a loan program, the money still exists somewhere, and if they go under, well, you tried. I mean, the Conservatives have one other thing to like do tax write-offs for workers to travel, or trade workers to travel for work, provided they fly coach, and they'll get rid of the write-offs for luxury corporate jets. That seems like something they can get the NDP on side with. That's fine. So yeah, an interesting week for them in terms of policy. The other parties had a lot less. The Liberals had something on agri-food. I think we'll skip over that for time, but their housing one came out this past week, right?
Yeah, the housing one, significant. And there's not much to say on the agribusiness one, except, it's once again like steadfastly and ideologically hanging on to supply management completely out of proportion to its actual benefits for the country.
I think it's potential. A decent benefit right now in terms of food stability. If there's one time we should definitely not take away supply management, it's right now.
Yeah, not necessarily agree with that, but because it causes higher prices for Canadians all the time on that, and there's better ways to address it. But we don't need to re-argue supply management again. We talked about the big housing announcement, which was the main thing they announced this week. Kind of got a little caught up in the Paul Chain stuff, because got announced that same morning that Carney was getting grilled on that. But yeah, this is probably the biggest policy announcement that's dropped in the campaign so far on it. So their goal is to double the amount of residential construction up to 500,000 homes per year. Still not enough, but a good improvement. So in doing so, they'd create an entity called the Build Canada Homes, BCH for short, which would be a government-backed operation to build homes. So it's like basically a public builder on that, to act as a developer for affordable housing on public lands. Fine on that. They'd put $25 billion of debt financing and $1 billion of equity, which is interesting there, into prefabricated home building, and also promised to create a sustained and dedicated order book on that, which has historically been one of the big problems with doing modular and prefabbed building construction, is that there's just a huge upfront investment in that, and that's fine when the market's booming, but whenever there's a downturn in it, there's not enough orders to keep the company solvent and pay off the upfront capital investment on it, so they tend to go under. Having a sustained purchase guarantee that can ride out the home building cycle would actually be a big benefit to getting that industry off the ground. And it would be good to get that off the ground, because one thing that has not gone well is the construction productivity statistics. By a bunch of measures, construction is actually less productive than it was 50 years ago.
So yeah, the additional parts of this plan are mostly just doing what they've already announced, but maybe like a little bit more, like juicing the Housing Accelerator Fund to further cut red tape at municipal levels, reduce zoning restrictions.
Yeah, they're promising they'd see municipal development charges half for multi-unit residential, which good.
They don't say how they'll do that. It's probably give a bunch of money to cities.
Yeah, and there's a part of me that like kind of grimaces a bit at the will pay a bunch of money to bad actors in this in order to get them on side, but
it's either that or you tell them they have to raise property taxes, and they're not going to do that.
I mean, they should raise property tax. Like, it's actually ridiculous how much new housing in the country is taxed. It's, probably one of the most highly taxed goods in the entire country.
Well, they promised to remove the GST on first-time home buyers for homes under $1 million.
Yeah, because I've seen estimates that's high as like 30% is the effective tax rate on new construction, which is insane, and no wonder things are expensive with that.
But yeah, taken as a whole, I think like this plan is take what the Liberals are doing now, add in the public sector developer that the NDP should have been talking about 6 months ago or 18 months ago and hasn't been for some reason. So they just like took that easy, obvious idea and promised to give it a bunch of money. And they made like a half decent plan here. Like there's a limited amount the federal government can do, as we've talked about before, and this kind of hits all of it.
Yeah, it's about as good as you can get, I think, on a federal one. I mean, there's a few things here and there you should probably tweak or go a little harder on, but importantly, it's asking the right questions, which we'll get to the NDP one, but they aren't. And, you can't solve a problem if you don't understand it or ask the right questions about it. So that already there's a win, and a lot of the stuff is moving in the right direction. Be nice to see, more faster, but honestly, it's probably the best thing that's come out so far. We'll have to see what the Conservatives put out. Bunch of it on we'll use the power of the federal government spending to get municipalities on board is an originally conservative idea, so we'll see where that goes, but I'll be interesting to watch for that.
Yeah, on the NDP side, they've still been trickling out housing policy. They've had one or two. This one is getting the CMHC to offer long-term low-interest mortgages for people. They're criticizing how much it's been used to preferential finance big developers, and so they want to offer a standard 0.5% cut on a mortgage for everyone who gets a CMHC backed mortgage. Essentially,
there have been so many home buyers incentives, subsidies for home buyers. The CMHC already exists to provide backing and stability to the mortgage system, which is in itself a kind of subsidy on that. It's not like there has been a lack of support for home buyers in the country. This is just going to be one of those we'll juice demand on it and not actually get to the core issue. And, they're leaning into the whole greedy developer trope thing here, which is just so not the problem in the housing market. It's that there's fundamentally a supply constraint in place, and that's driving up home prices. And, complaining about the people who's trying to build the homes is just dumb, but, not unexpected for the NDP.
I'm totally happy with it. They can beat people who have money all they want, but they should have been talking about actually building the homes themselves. I don't know what else we're doing here with the NDP. They released a couple other policies, one on climate and one on victory bonds, which are both the climate stuff was fine, doing more home retrofits and
The victory bonds are
the victory bonds
dumb.
was just, I don't know. They want to basically issue bonds at pretty good rates, which would be nice, and tax-free, and then use that money to invest in infrastructure construction is the goal.
So this is basically them trying to World War II cosplay. It's a ridiculous policy that's not addressing kind of any of the problems or not even looking at the problems that need to be addressed. So they're proposing interest rates here that are fairly well above what the current bond yields are for Canadian government bonds, and there is absolutely no sign that the government has any trouble raising capital by issuing bonds at the current rates, and they can increment them up between where they are now and this if they have any trouble selling. It's one thing in wartime when there is actually a dearth of money coming in and a problem raising funds in the normal capital markets where something like victory bonds made sense, but that is just not the situation we're in right now. So all this would effectively do is just raise the cost of servicing the federal debt, and because they're primarily going to be spent on infrastructure, also by extension making any infrastructure project federally funded more expensive than it otherwise would be. All to do what? Get bonds that get bonds that are more expensive than what the government can already do. The tax-free thing's slightly interesting. So like under the U.S. tax system, municipal bonds are tax-free and stuff. So it's hardly unprecedented, but it's also tax-free on a 3.5% return. That's not a lot of savings on that, and it's just silly. It's World War II cosplay. It's not actually tackling any of the problems faced by the government, and just makes the NDP look unserious.
Well, we don't have time, but the Greens, for their part, did announce kind of a defense policy that involved the creation of a national civil defense corps. And I think it's the first time the Greens have been in support of increasing military funding in their history. Notably, I think one of the formal Green principles is nonviolence or pacifism. And so
they in their do call for the reserve forces to be expanded, which is, I believe, the first time I can remember that they've called for an increase in any kind in the size or scope of the military. It's still woefully inadequate. In the press release, they say this is not a call for militarization, when it probably should be the time for some more militarization, considering the state of the Canadian forces and the fact that Canada needs to be able to do a lot more by itself than it currently can.
And that has been Politicoast. Find links to everything we talked about at politicoast.ca. Support the show and get access to our exclusive Slack channel at patreon.com/politicoast. Our intro music is Beautiful British Columbia by Serge Plotnikov. Politicoast is a production of Leg and Boot Media. Audio editing provided by Jesse Woodward at listener-supported CHLY 101.7 FM in Nanaimo. Learn more at chly.ca.